Good evening, everyone. Welcome to our agenda-setting meeting of May 15th, 2018. I'm not going to go through the preliminary things to begin our meeting. I'll go back to that after I call our special call session. There's a legal requirement that we have what's called a table meeting. It's Taxpayers
Bill of Rights.
Okay. Taxpayers Bill of Rights, a meeting that was passed by the General Assembly in 1999 that requires us to have a public hearing if the tax amount that we're collecting is increasing, even though we're not raising the millage rate. And so the millage rate is staying constant, but because of increases in assessment, many of our taxpayers will see their tax bills go up. Of course, there's a possibility that some of them may see theirs go down too. But the overall increase in the tax base is creating a tax increase across the board for the government. So we have to have the table hearing. And Ms. Spratton, would you call the roll for us, please?
Dickerson. Here. Link. Here. Wright.
Present.
Bailey. Neesmith.
Here.
Dale.
Here.
Harrod.
Present.
Sturts.
Here.
Hamby.
Thank you, Ms. And I'm sorry for rushing, but we've got one commissioner that has a commitment, has to leave for one of her high school seniors that's graduating. And so I didn't want to hold her up, and we had to have a quorum to start the meeting. So this is the time that anyone that would like to speak to that, to our millage rate or the increase that's resulting from the increase in the assessments would like to come forward and speak to us. This would be the time to speak to that. And then after that, we'll have to conduct a hearing on the FY19 budget, where you can speak to anything budget related. But this first part is just for the Taxpayers Bill of Rights. Anyone wish to speak to us? Okay, hearing none, we will go to the next purpose of our meeting, and that's to consider a proposal of the proposed FY19 budget. And both oral and written comments are received. And if you wish to address the Mayor and Commission on these items, any budget-related item, please come to the podium. And we have a 3-minute rule, so please honor that 3-minute rule. There's a light on Ms. Spratlin's desk here that will turn yellow when you have a half minute of your 3 minutes left. So feel free to come to the podium and talk to us about anything budget-related you'd like us to hear about.
Thank you, Mayor and Commissioners. My name is Ashley Short, and I live at 145 Hart Avenue. While I am here in my personal capacity, I am a director for Athens Pets, the 501c3 organization that serves as the volunteer group for animal control. That background informed my comments here today. I am here because we need an additional full-time animal control officer position provided for in the budget. I know animal control has asked for this in the past years, and I am asking you to provide it in the fiscal year 2019 budget. One full-time animal control officer position was cut when weekend services were terminated several years ago. Because weekend service was approximately 20 animal control officer hours, cutting a full-time position meant that not just weekend service was cut, but 20 weekday hours were cut as well, leaving the shelter short-staffed even given the intended reduction in service at the time. This shortfall reduces the ability of animal control officers to prevent issues by responding, for example, to a loose dog before he has bitten someone or caused a car accident, not only on weekends, as expected when service was cut, but also during the week. As a result, instead of animals being brought to the shelter before injury to residents, it is only after the injury that they come in. Moreover, in many instances, animal control needs to be able to have 2 animal control officers on site for their own safety. For example, there are time-sensitive calls to animal control where there is a known aggressive dog. While animal control calls police for accompaniment at such times, it is important that there be a second trained animal control professional on hand as well. We need sufficient staffing so that these issues can be handled quickly while ensuring the safety of everyone involved, including county staff. Part-time staff is not a replacement for a full-time animal control officer, in part because of the demands of being on call, and in part because professionals with the skills needed to be animal control officers can find full-time employment elsewhere. Turnover on the part-time animal control officer position is very high. In the last year, for example, there have been 3 different part-time employees for one position. In between each, the position has been unfilled for several months. Significant county resources, including animal control officer time resulting in further short staffing, has been sent training the next hire just to see that person quit. Full-time positions do not see that turnover. The need for an additional full-time animal control officer is critical at this point, and I ask the commission to fund this as a part of the fiscal year 2019 budget. Thank you.
Would you remind us how much that is? I know we have it in our budget documents. Do you have it with you?
How much the position
The cost,
is?
the cost of position, the request.
Not in the budget because it's not broken down
That's
per
okay.
individual employee. It's all
That-
one line item.
That's okay. We have that. I just didn't know whether you had it with you.
Thank you.
Thank you for coming, and thank you for the work you all do, too.
Thank you, Mayor and Commissioners. I'm Lisa Milet from 237 Hiawassee Avenue, and like Ashley, I'm here to ask you to provide funding for the additional animal control officer in the budget by expanding on the information I provided in the memo I emailed each of you on May 3rd. I know that the need for this position is not visible in the animal control outcomes and performance measures table in the recommended budget. The metrics show stability or a reduction in the number of animal control calls across each category across the last several years. What they don't show is the amount of time animal control officers now spend working with residents on coming into compliance after each call. In previous years, if an animal control officer noted a violation, she would issue a warning and schedule a recheck at a predetermined time, say next Tuesday at 3 p.m. As might be expected, on that recheck, almost all residents are in compliance. However, it turns out this wasn't really fixing problems. People returned to their patterns of behavior after the scheduled recheck, so that the animal was left in the same substandard living arrangements or a nuisance to the community after the recheck was complete. Animal control officers now perform a minimum of one more recheck unannounced several weeks after the first. In many cases, the earlier violations have reappeared. Attempts to resolve them often take 3 to 5 additional contacts. None of this time is reflected in the metrics and means that the time represented by each call has increased significantly. This is a really good thing for the animals and the residents of Athens-Clarke County. The risk to community members from having neglected or free-roaming dogs has decreased significantly thanks to these efforts. But doing it effectively requires full-time animal control officers for consistency, and so that the process does not begin anew each time the animal control officer changes, wasting additional county resources. In addition, I ask that additional funds be provided for animal care. This need is another item that is not apparent from the face of the metrics, but represents a really fantastic improvement at the shelter that you all should know about. The recommended budget shows that the euthanasia rate of adoptable animals at the shelter has declined in the past few years from 7.8% to 1.8%, which is great. But the actual decline in the death rate of cats and dogs impounded at the shelter has been even more impressive. The shelter has quietly been moving hundreds of animals from the euthanized for treatable medical conditions category, conditions like upper respiratory infections, a cold, to the adopted category. In 2014, only 68% of impounded dogs and cats made it out of the shelter alive. Nearly one-third, 750 animals in total, died or were euthanized at the shelter. By 2017, this was true of only 18%, or 350 of the impounded cats and dogs. It's an astounding reduction of 50% of the number of animals that are dying at our shelter. Getting and keeping that number down should be our goal. This takes money which Athens Pets has been supplying. The county budget provides only $8 per impounded animal for food, vaccination, microchips, legally mandated testing, and general care. I'm asking that you provide half of what it's taken to make this change at animal control, a total of $10 per animal impounded, by adjusting line items in the budget so that operating funds are applied for this purpose, or by allocating new funds totaling $20,000. Thank you.
Thank you, Lisa. And again, thank you all, our volunteers, for the help you give us. Is anyone else that wishes to address us about a budget-related item? Okay, seeing none, we'll come behind the rail now, and we'll start our normal agenda meeting. And I will give y'all the pre-agenda, the pre-meeting things that I normally need to tell everybody. And thank you both to those of you that are here with us tonight and those watching us on TV. Anyone who would like an agenda that's here, they're on the table to the right of the exit doors. And anyone watching remotely can get them at accgov.com. No final action is taken tonight on agenda items. Items discussed will move to our business meeting on Tuesday, June 5th for consideration and vote. If you have a cell phone tonight or any other electronic device, please turn it off or to silent. There are several opportunities for citizen input tonight. We only receive comment on items that are on the published agenda and at agenda meetings. I will let you know the appropriate time as each of these time frames come up because it can be a bit confusing. Rules of Commission allow citizens 3 minutes for comment. There's a timing clock on Ms. Spratlin's desk which will turn yellow at 2.5 minutes. Please have your remarks finished before then so there'll be no need to interrupt you. If you brought handouts, if you'll hand them to Mr. Berryman, he'll make sure that we get them. So we will now go to the consent portion of our agenda, which are items 1 through 8. Anyone who wishes to speak to one of those items, please come to the podium and tell us which item you're speaking to. Seeing none, we'll come behind the rail. Would any commissioner like to remove one to go to the discussion agenda? Ms. Link.
4 and 8, please.
Anyone else? And those will go to the top of new business for discussion. We'll do the old business next. Okay. This is the time for any commissioner who would like to speak to any of the other items other than the Planning Commission items, and those are items 9 through 21, to come to the podium and let us hear from you. Anyone wish to speak to any of the items 9 through 21? Okay.
Hi, my name is Katrina Evans. I live at 240 Oak Bluff Drive, and I'm here to talk to you about Clayton Street tonight. I'm here tonight to make an impassioned plea to hold off on curb approvals for Clayton Street. I'm obviously championing for the removal of 3 parking spaces at the connection of Thomas and Clayton. You informally voted on it last week, and there were some questions, and I'll provide some answers to that. Yes, the 3 business owners at that area, no shocker, they would like their spaces. But if you ask the employees who use those spaces, they'll report that they actually observe people park there and walk elsewhere, that people don't routinely use those spaces. It's also important to note that Clayton narrows at Thomas significantly, so any wider sidewalks that occur closer to Lumpkin don't occur there. It's just a mere inches of gain. One commissioner mentioned that the Classic Center really aligns with Washington, so any pedestrian gateway should be created there. While I certainly would lobby for a deliberate connection there, that's a hypothetical project that could occur possibly in a decade. Clayton Street alone is a project 13 years in the making. And it's really not an either-or scenario. Both should occur. Again, we're letting 300,000 people enter downtown through the back door. It's the worst part of downtown. And these are basic urban design principles. It's not new. If we look at our much-studied neighbor Greenville, they have expanded pedestrian areas nearly on every block of certain streets, certainly prominent streets. Cities don't look back and say, I really wish I gave less focus to pedestrians when all the planning is done. As an architect working on various sizes of projects, I'm also shocked that this project went from preliminary design to final design in a few short months. In the non-governmental world, there would be several steps between to ensure that buy-in and design is improved at every step. And it doesn't have to be about Thomas and Clayton, it has to be about public input, and this project really didn't change from January to now, and I'm wondering why that occurred. I'm also surprised to hear the SPLOST manager say that they worked closely with David and Linda to create this solution. The ADDA board has actually discussed the design, often heatedly, and we actually scheduled an agenda item for next month to vote on this. So I think that we thought also that preliminary did not mean final. See my time. When I mention enhanced pedestrian spaces, I'm not asking for a garden or a playground or a large gathering space. I'm lobbying to prioritize people walking into downtown. Maybe creating a sidewalk cafe, maybe creating a space to enjoy art, converse, and enjoy the beauty of downtown. This decision to alter curb lines does not require more money, but it does require more thought. You've probably spent hours talking about traffic flow, parking counts, and now trash and eco stations. So I believe that creating a thriving pedestrian space along Clayton deserves just as much time.
Thank you, Ms. Evans.
Thank you.
Good evening. Donna Thurman, 145 Leanne Drive, Athens, 30601. And I'm standing here tonight wondering why it seems like deja vu and Groundhog's Day when it comes to issues regarding West Hancock and the Reese Street corridor.
Ma'am, I'm sorry that we're not at that point in the agenda yet. That'll be at the end of the meeting.
Okay.
Item 19, yes.
19?
Item 19.
Okay, I thought you said 220 something, that's why. Item 19?
Go ahead. We actually have an item that's West Hancock Neighborhood Public Engagement Process.
Okay.
And that relates to engaging a consultant to work with us. Is that what you're speaking to?
Part of it, yes.
Okay,
Yes.
go ahead.
Okay.
I apologize for interrupting you. Donna.
Okay. Okay. Well, like I was saying, I'm standing here wondering why it seems like deja vu and Groundhog's Day every time we come to this part of Reese Street and the West Hancock corridor. I don't understand it. I don't understand why it is that the commission that was, elected to listen to us and work with us and support us they're not hearing us. It keeps coming up with this thing back on the agenda again. So I'm just, if it sounds like I'm frustrated, we're frustrated. And I understand there's a process, but this neighborhood has gone through this process time and time again. We've done everything that we've been asked to do on this project. Repeatedly. And I know that Mike Hamley knows because he is the chairperson of the West Broad Feasibility Study, which I am also a member of. So he knows intimately how we've, fought for this process. So I'm asking that at least Mr. Hamley, at least on the commission, should vote in favor of us because he knows what we've gone through and how we feel about this thing. So if we can't, I wish he was here. I wish he was here so I could really speak to him about how we want him to vote on this thing. He should vote favorable. He knows how hard we worked on this. We want this commission to vote in favor for extension of the moratorium and an outside consultant so we can get a recommendation that would be unbiased. Thanks.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you. Anyone else wish to speak to us tonight? And the issue of the moratorium is not up for discussion at this point, so other items on the agenda are.
My name is Sarah Clark. I live at 852 Reese Street, and I get a little confused too. But this Title 19, is this about an outside study?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. I would so much like for there to be, an outside person who could come in, study our neighborhood, see if we can't keep it, diverse, single family, if there's some way to incorporate the Bernie house into something for the neighborhood or for the city. So if that is what this is about, I, am all in favor of that. And, I think everybody in the neighborhood would be. Everybody in West Hancock would like a little bit more input about what's going to happen to our neighborhood in the future.
Thank you, Ms. Clark.
Thank you.
Hey, I'm Jody Barber. I live at 958 Reese Street, and I'd like to also say that I'd be in support of bringing in an outside consultant to look at Reese Street. That's it.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Hi, my name's Kim Klanowski, and I live at 125 Wilcox Street. And I'm
Sorry.
here.
I'm sorry, I didn't get your last name.
It's Klanowski.
Klanowski.
Yes. And I'm here representing the Athens-Clarke Heritage Foundation this evening and the Board of Trustees. And we would like to respectfully request that the County Commission extend the Reese Street neighborhood moratorium in order for staff to essentially facilitate the agreed upon study of this neighborhood to consider zoning changes. The Athens-Clarke Heritage Foundation has a vital interest in preservation, as you all know, and particularly we're very concerned about some neighborhoods that have not historically been well served, specifically by preservation efforts. So we hope that you would continue, as some other people have mentioned, to consider completing this study. That's it. Thank you.
Ms. Skolnowski.
Good evening. My name is Rita Cornelius, and I live at 1082 Reese Street. And my concern is also that we have an outside person to come in to look at what's going on, because those of us that live there and that it's our passion. It's where my husband has been for 68 years. It's where I have been for the last 40 years. And I'm looking at our neighborhood go from being a wonderful neighborhood of neighbors to just being some houses of business. I see students everywhere, and I don't have anything against students. My daughter is a student, but our people are being forced out of their homes because they're being offered what appears to be a good price for their property, and it's not really being explained to them what they're getting or what they're losing. Elderly people sometimes just get excited about the fact that I won't have to worry about this anymore, and I'll get X amount of dollars. But to us, and I consider myself not elderly and not the youngest, but I am of that age group that I still have some life, and I want to live it where our parents busted their behinds for $5 and $20 a week to have a home. And I don't want it to be given away or taken away by those who are seeking to make more money or to make the big bucks and are not worried about the little people. So if you'll have somebody to come in that thinks about the little people, and then I'll come back if necessary about the moratorium.
Thank you, Ms. Cornelius. Anyone else wish to speak to us? Okay, seeing none, we'll come behind the rail, and we will start our discussion with the commissioners. And the first item up is number 9, which is the Fire Station number 2 SPLOST project, which is the Cooperative Extension Service and the fire station, and it's the construction contract award. Mr. Neesmith.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I believe this idea of delaying this came from the idea of not building the Cooperative Extension Center on the west side, and instead building it on the east side. Well, let's look at this. The east side, we do not have real estate set aside, purchased, or anything else for the east side. One of the ideas, it would be part of a government center. We don't know where the government center is going to be. It might be on the west side. We don't know how much money a government's going to cost for a new government center. It probably would be a part of a SPLOST. We don't even know if that SPLOST would pass. Also, the idea of having the cooperative extension as part of a government center doesn't make sense to me. There's no one in the cooperative extension that is a Clarke County employee. They're UGA employees. We provide the facility. That's our contract with the state government, is to provide the facility, and the university provides the employees. We provide little or no funding to the Cooperative Extension Center. There is no advantage for the Cooperative Extension Center to be part of a government complex. In fact, we would be wasting our money if we took up real estate for a Cooperative Extension Center in a government complex. We have other purposes for that complex, and it's not a Cooperative Extension Center. Another item is the cost of the real estate. We have no idea what it will cost to acquire the real estate for a Cooperative Extension Center in another location. We do know that the construction costs will go up, and we're facing that now with the proposal that's before us to approve a construction contract for a firehouse and a Cooperative Extension Center. The costs went up in the short period of time between our site selection approval and now the awarding of the contract. I would imagine there'll be cost in designing a new Cooperative Extension Center. It'll be on a different piece of real estate with different contours, so forth. So the new design will cost additional money, as will land preparation. We've built in the preparation of the land for both the firehouse and the Cooperative Extension Center, saving money. Now we're going to have to prepare the land for the firehouse if we move this, and then prepare the land for the Cooperative Extension Center. And a real crying need is the fact that the Cooperative Extension Center needs a new facility. They are literally having to put buckets down in their offices when it rains now. They do not have the space to do their programs. They need a new facility. We will also perhaps realize increased costs for the fire station because the purchase of that land is going to have to be now part of the fire station proposal, which will take it outside the budget that was approved for the fire station. So I say that it's quite frankly a folly, frankly, for us to consider reciting the Cooperative Extension Center, especially after the great deal of time that the Site Selections Committee did, really trying to put it on the east side. And I had no objection to that at all. But we've done that. We saw that there were very few options. The options don't exist now. We would have to find a new option. We don't have one. So let's build the Cooperative Extension Center and the firehouse and get on our way. Thank you.
Ms. Wright?
Yeah, I want to thank the management for the amount of reading, new reading and old reading on this topic, and getting it all fresh in our eyes. I think it's everything from the site selection two rounds that they did, and reminding us of the amount of time that this has been in progress. I'll be ready to vote in support of what we have on the agenda right now at the June meeting. But I haven't had time with all the budget stuff to read all the information, but what I have read has reminded me of why I did vote, and I think most of the votes were, if not all, unanimous in getting us to this point. And I think it is good for us to not always stick to everything that we have had before and to be in a reevaluation mode and to listen to new ideas. I think that that's good, and it strengthens the decision. But when it delays a decision to where it's costing us more and leaving us with more unpredictable costs, that it's good for us to do our homework at the time that we can make a smart financial and decision, which I think it is to move forward.
That's right, Ms. Wright.
Of course, from the very beginning, I've been totally opposed to this location for this facility, and I continue to be opposed to it. We purchased a lot that was ideally located for our fire station, but it was much larger and much more expensive than was budgeted for our fire station. So in order to make up for that budget loss, we decided to plop the cooperative extension on it, to save money and joint construction costs and whatever. It's not ideally located for that facility. And I would hope that everyone would reach out to cooperative extension employees and ask them how they really feel about that location. I know we did get a document from staff that showed an overlap of users of the facility, master gardeners and master composters, and where they live versus east side and west side. And There are certainly more living on the east side than the west side. It wasn't significantly more, but I'd also like to see a similar document showing how many 4-H students and the scattered map of where 4-H students live and where our SNAP Ed participants live and where our UGA professors. They teach classes at the Cooperative Extension facility, and a lot of them would be coming from campus, specifically East Campus, where they work at the College of Ag. There are way more users of that facility than master gardeners and master composters. So I think we really need a lot more information to understand who would be directly impacted by this facility being located on the far west side of town, which is far from most of our agricultural facilities. And I think we do need to really consider the wants and needs and desires of the employees. They haven't had much of a voice in this, and this site selection was performed by a site selection committee that didn't really have anything to do with the facility. There was no return to the user group, from what I understand. These user groups with these SPLOST projects, I feel like there's a flawed process for allowing these user groups to participate, or even for assigning who sits on these user groups. So I feel like there's still a lot more information, and I feel like the decision was made hastily 2 years ago. A couple weeks ago, I attended the 4-Hers awards banquet, and there were several 4-H students who were juniors 2 years ago when this decision was made, and I'd spoken with them then, and they were really upset that this facility was going to be way on the other side of town. They were Cedar Shoals students. That's where your 4-Hers are. And we had, since delayed this, and I told them there was a chance that this facility might not be located way on the outskirts of town, and they were overjoyed. It would have no impact on them. They're graduating, but they foresaw the trouble that it would be to future 4-Hers to get on the loop and drive all the way out to the west side of town, and the danger that poses to teen drivers. That's my biggest concern, is teenagers on the road rushing out to the other side of town on the loop. That's one of my main concerns.
Anyone else wish to speak to this item? Mr. Harris?
I think most of us have already made up our minds on this issue, but I just wanted to correct something. This site was not unanimously approved 2 years ago, because I voted against it. But I think at the end of the day, it needs to be located, even if it's going to cost a little bit more money, it needs to be located where it's going to be used the most by the people that it's designed to be used for. And I just don't think that the present suggested location is that location.
Anybody else? Okay, we'll move on to item number 4, which was taken off the consent agenda, which is the Dudley Park improvements, master plan revisions. And Ms. Link, you took that out off.
Yeah, I did. I
it?
mostly for community discussion. This is exciting. We had some public input on the changes to the master plan for Dudley Park. And we're looking at getting started on some of those changes, including some water access and a blue trail. So I just want to encourage the public to take a look at this agenda item and look at some of the improvements that are coming to this park.
Okay. Anybody else? Y'all okay for this to go back to consent?
Yeah.
Okay. And then item number 8 was on the consent agenda, and again, you took that off, Ms. Link, would you?
Yeah, I'd just like for staff to go through the process as to, here we have an extended moratorium on Millage Circle and Castalia Avenue, which a year ago, these 2 streets in 5 Points were granted a demolition moratorium to pursue possible historic designation. And that moratorium runs out, I believe, in the next day or two. Is that correct? I'd just like some insight into why this neighborhood is being granted a moratorium extension.
Ms. Link, I don't think management can answer that for you.
I mean, can somebody tell me the process as to what this neighborhood went through?
Well,
there is a predetermined process for historic designation, And this is a very active, very engaged neighborhood with a listserv and a neighborhood association, yet they weren't able to complete that predetermined process in a year. Is that correct?
Ms. Link, I think I'm the only one that can answer this for you because this was my decision.
Okay.
And this was requested by me to put on the agenda for a 30-day extension. And the reason that it didn't get finished was not the community. It just took a little bit longer to get to that, to the point of having the study finished and getting it back to us. And they needed a very short length of time to get it finished. So it has a 30-day extension.
So staff conducted this study, correct?
It was conducted internally, wasn't it, Blaine? My understanding was it was internal, yes.
That's right.
And I decided because it was a very small time frame to give them the time to finish that process. And it'll be on our agenda in July.
Okay.
Oh, sorry, yeah, right.
Anybody else want to speak to item number 8?
Yeah, I
Yes,
wanted
ma'am.
to just thank you for that extension, because I think that some of the other consideration is because of the depth of information that will come forward with the results of the study that was made. And remember that the moratorium started with a defined goal, and it was modified as we listened along the way. But it is a wealth of information for us to study, to move forward and discuss it as an agenda item. And we have been very busy, and we have a very busy, full agenda here. So I appreciate it being here as an extension so that we can have more time to process what has come forward.
And there is a very well-defined reason for it. So anyone else wish to speak to item number?
Can we put that back
8?
on consent?
Anybody have a problem with it being on consent? Okay. We will now go to item number 10, which is Clayton Street Infrastructure and Transportation Improvements. And these are preliminary plans. Anyone wish to speak to item number 10? Ms. Link.
Yeah, I just want to acknowledge Ms. Evans' comments about Clayton Street. Katrina Evans is an architect, and she sits on the Downtown Development Authority Board. You know, theoretically, one of the reasons we would assign someone who has those kind of professional design skills to that board is so they would have an opportunity to weigh in on decisions like this, important design changes to our downtown. Yet the ADDA board was not consulted in this initial decision to set the curb width and the sidewalk width and the parking configuration. Again, this was a SPLOST user group that made these decisions. And, you know, the parameters of the decision-making process and the preliminary designs were not run by the ADDA. And this commission specifically decided to forego public input on that initial design phase. So there were quite a few downtown business owners who were really upset about that. That the public has not only has the public not had an opportunity for input on that initial design phase, but the ADDA members themselves. So I will continue to not be comfortable with this project, this design, because it hasn't undergone that public input. And I hope that maybe perhaps we could reconsider. You know, there's some specific areas along the corridor that folks have addressed, and I just don't know. I don't know what the process is that might be for possibly readdressing them. I think it's a serious problem that, you know, we have a board, you know, that's supposed to offer recommendations to this commission. You know, we have a citizen board, and yet we've overlooked their role. And I frequently ask this: why do we even have these citizen boards if we're not going to consult with them or listen to their advice?
Yes, sir.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I want to draw out a couple of points, one of which is that we had 2 public meetings in this room in which there was citizen input at the outset of the year. And the other is that there were a number of forums over in the Michael Brothers building at which there was sort of broader input as well. And also want to note that this is one segment of a broader project, and that much broader project is the question of what happens on those sidewalk and pedestrian avenue surfaces, what the furniture will look like, what the tree plantings will look like, where they'll be placed. And so I just don't want anybody to have the impression that this is the sum total of the project that we're talking about here. Again, we're talking about the curb line essentially, and the sidewalk width from edge of the building envelope to that curb.
Anybody else wish to speak? Yes, sir, Mr.
I would just add as well,
Williams.
it's a policy decision that's before you, but from a project implementation, we've thought long and hard. We've wondered how this would go, and I know there's a lot of property owners, business owners that want this to go as painlessly as possible, obviously. But with the June decision on this, our crews will begin the pre-deg activities in June.
Yes, sir. Anyone else wish to address? Ms. Link, I will address something real quickly because this came up on the ADDA board this past week, of which I'm also a member. And the difference is, you asked, why we had a board to give us recommendations, and that's not the purpose of the ADDA. The ADDA is not an advisory board to the mayor and commission. It's a legislatively created development authority with actually a taxing authority of their own. They assess taxes in the downtown district, and they are charged with development of the downtown area, not advising the mayor and commission. Although we do listen to and value the advice, that's not the role of that board. Anyone, you want to speak to this further?
Yeah, at the work session on this, I asked for the raw public input, because there was public input on the second phase of this project, which is the bricks and benches and that kind of stuff. I'd like to see that raw public input, because that was the only real opportunity for in-depth interactive public input on the project.
I think I provided that.
Did you? Okay, I'll have to look through my email.
I'll check. If not, I'll either resend it or send
Okay.
it to you first.
I must have missed it.
Okay, the next item on our agenda is number 11, which are pedestrian improvement projects, and it's at various locations. Anyone wish to talk about that? Mr. Gertz.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I just appreciate the staff work continuing our pedestrian improvement projects. I think the work on the ground already has been wildly successful, and rarely does a week go by in which someone doesn't thank us for the work that was been done on Prince Avenue or Cedar Shoals Drive, or the even much earlier work on Baxter Street near the library. The one little note that I would make is, as I usually do when these projects come before us, involves the aesthetics of the project, and particularly having planting areas kind of in the Mitchell Bridge, South Millage, and College Station Road areas to the greatest degree possible. And we know that there are some viewshed concerns around what kind of plantings we have, but just so that we could have some green space in those islands rather than just concrete pads.
Yes, Ms. Rock.
Yes, we had seen these before. I think it was in November, before we had gotten some information about the RRFBs. And so we halted for a little bit, and then we're back to it now. At that time, I had questions about the College Station Road east of Research Drive, and I still do, and I think I can articulate those questions, and maybe the details can come in email. With that, it's a $25,000 project, and I was wanting a breakdown of the equipment cost as well as the installation cost, because on College Station Road, I think at the same width, because it's a complete street, the same width, we have pedestrian issues close to where the College of Veterinary Medicine is now, has their new campus. And so I was curious to know the distance from the one near Research Drive, how close that crosswalk is to the existing light on College Station where there is a crosswalk, so that I can understand the distance between that, and if there's an assessment that there could be a crosswalk near College Station, towards the vet school, then understanding, because I think that crosswalk there where that was assessed might be further from the traffic light in the existing crosswalk, and to see if that might be more appropriate to be at the vet school if we're adding one to College Station.
Sure. Well, just based on inquiries from both you and Commissioner Harrod, our road safety team took a look at the vet med area and scored it against our criteria, and it scored well enough to be needed. And while these funds don't install that crosswalk, it will be eligible for FY19 funding, which we will have once you approve the budget, and it will be the first mid-block crosswalk installed,
Okay.
if that's the end result you're seeking.
Okay, and then there were some additional details talking about if, as I think we should, because of safety is imperative time-wise, if things change at the Kroger development and we need to move that crosswalk there, if I have the details of the equipment versus installation, that might give us an idea of how a future need to move that, we would be looking ahead to that possibility.
We could certainly do that, and I hope I'm not speaking out of turn, but if there were some cost incurred to move the crosswalk because of driveway entrances or changes to the access to the property, we may look to the developer to help offset that cost.
Well, that would be a good idea.
Can't guarantee it, but that'd be our
Right.
first plan.
But we'll just keep that
Yeah.
tucked in our hats for that. Thank you.
Mr.
Well, I just to reiterate that, I mean, I think this is an important corridor, and Commissioner Wright and myself, and also Commissioner Dickerson had asked about this issue, and so I'm glad to see that we'll be moving forward on it.
Great. Anybody else? Yes, sir.
I want to reiterate what Commissioner Gertz said about the islands and making them nice. And of course, I'm looking at Mitchell Bridge Road. That'll be a nice addition, and it will definitely help beautify what's already been greatly improved with the latest work that we did on Mitchell Bridge Road with the widening and sidewalks and so forth. So this will send a good message to pedestrians that there is a place to walk near Atlanta Highway.
Yes,
One
ma'am.
more thing, and if I'm reading this right, the one on Baxter that's now going to get the
RFP.
Thank you. I don't know why I can't get that acronym right. But it's an existing crosswalk, and it's one of our best-looking ones with the 2 trees in it. So I just wanted to say that that is a nice template that we could replicate where the sight line, because where it's appropriate. And then I wanted to know if we could put it on consent agenda.
Anybody have a problem with that on consent? Okay. Got
Well,
that, Mrs. Bratton?
You might want to talk about the tree idea.
Well, I know, I was just going to say, I appreciate the commissioner's comments, and I think a lot of folks are noticing these, in their neighborhoods, but collectively across the county, the mayor and commission have authorized, quite a few of these installations, and so within the last year or so, last couple of years, there's been a lot of pedestrian safety improvements implemented.
Right. Okay, we're going to item number 12, which is the Georgia Department of Transportation's off-system safety grant application. And for everybody's edification, this is money that DOT is giving us with no strings attached. So, anybody want to comment on that? Ms. Terry?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I think it's great. I think we should move forward, but I did have a question, and maybe I just misread this, but I thought I read somewhere, so this is GDOT money, but several of the intersections, because they're GDOT intersections, they're not eligible for this money to be spent on them, and I'm just trying to figure out what's going on here.
The answer to your question lies in the title, and this is a off-system safety grant. So these are off the GDOT system. They've freed up some money for local road safety improvements.
Okay.
As part of the new money they have from the fuel tax.
So this is not
These are non-GDOT
different
roads.
to, this is in addition to. In other words, this is not instead of, doesn't mean that they're not going to do these things, things on their own intersections, but
Yeah.
That's correct.
that's a separate pot of money. That
Exactly.
Okay.
Yes,
All
sir.
right. Well, as I say, I kind of read it and I thought that was, maybe I lost my reading facilities. I don't know.
Well, I think this is the first time we've seen something like this, isn't it, Mr. Williams? I haven't seen it before, so.
It's great. Thank you, GDOT.
Yeah. And
Can we
consent? Yes, ma'am. Everybody okay with that? Okay, item number 13, which is Parks Facilities Improvement, and this is sub-project 12-16 concepts, and so anybody would like to talk about this? Some nice things being done there.
Which one is it? Which one is it?
This is
Several.
Yeah, it's,
Various park improvements.
yes, sir, yes, sir.
All I have to say is, can we put it on consent?
Yes, I think it's great on consent. Did somebody want, was somebody asking
Break
what?
it down. I mean, if, it's on, in the large packet, it's on a page
Yeah.
101, I think, that lists the bridges at Sandy Creek, gym floors at East Athens and Lay Park, tennis courts. Am I at the right place?
Yes, you're in
Blaine?
the right place, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, Sandy Creek, East Campus, Lay, Southeast Clark, tennis courts, playground equipment, repair at Satterfield, ball field repair at Lay and Holland, park entrance signs.
Yes, you got it.
There we go.
I'm glad.
Those are
projects that have already been approved.
Oh, I went to the wrong spot.
And
Okay.
finished, too.
Okay. All right, sir.
The list for these three
Okay.
is a small mammal
Oh,
exhibit at Memorial Park.
I'm sorry, I told you wrong.
There you go.
Yeah.
Number 5 on
It's-
30,
yeah.
on 103.
It's the small mammal exhibit, the ball field renovation at Satterfield Park, and playground replacement at Sandy Creek. All of these exciting, the ones that are finished and the ones that are upcoming. Thank you all.
All right.
Mr.
I noticed Ben Burton Park
sir.
isn't on here anywhere. Again. Come on. We got a master plan we put together a dozen years ago. We still haven't done anything significant other than clear invasive species and cut down some bushes on the sight line from Mitchell Bridge Road. We need to do something for that park. It's a beautiful park that's being underutilized and needs to be taken care of. I just want you to get on the master plan and start working on it. Thank
Yes,
you.
ma'am.
Commissioner Neesmith, you do have our only river access launch site.
Yeah,
I know
which
that's
goes-
not
which
everything.
goes nowhere.
It goes downriver.
Yeah, it goes downriver.
Oh, it goes as away from your park, right?
Yeah. It goes to Macon.
Okay. Maybe in Mr. Neesmith's lifetime, we will get something done to that
You
park.
better get going.
He's not going to quit talking to us about it until we do.
No, I'm not.
And good for you, Jerry. It's over there close to where I live, too, so. Okay.
Consent? Do we
A
pick
consent agenda? Anybody have a problem with
Sure.
that? Okay. The next item, number 14, is a real fun one, review of septage fees. And that's your bailiwick.
Well, first of all, I want to thank the committee for bearing with the process. When we passed the septage fees back a year ago, we got some feedback from the providers saying the fees were too high and it was going to discourage emptying of septic tanks. And so we agreed to take another look and we changed the fees. And we changed the fees so that it was 3 tiers. Well, really, it's just 2 tiers and then a prohibition. One tier was septage coming from within Athens-Clarke County at a lower rate than septage coming from what we call J-boom counties. That's Jackson, Barrow, Oglethorpe, Oconee, and Madison. They come in at a higher rate, and we prohibit the collection, the deposit of septage in our facilities from anything outside those counties. We discovered that there's a local businessman who operates within Athens-Clarke County, and some of his clients are outside of Athens-Clarke County and the J-boom counties. So we had what I would consider to be an unintended consequence, which is basically limiting the scope of his business or increasing his expenses because he has to go somewhere else to deposit his septage. After a great deal of discussion, we came up with what I think is a good solution, and that is we make, and this is also an economic preservation idea, which is that if the septage provider, the disposer, is a business, Clarke County-based business, then he can deposit septage from outside the J-boom counties at the J-boom County, at the higher J-boom County rates. Then it became a matter of defining what an Athens-Clarke County-based business is, and doing it in such a way that it's easy to understand and easy to figure out who they might be. So what we said was that if they were in operation prior to January 1st, 2018, and continues to operate without interruption, a staffed, fixed physical place of operations in Athens-Clarke County and satisfies the following requirements. They pay an occupation tax to the Unified Government of Athens-Clarke County using the address of the such physical space and the locations as required by the occupation tax ordinance, that the place is lawfully zoned for that business, and that the place of operations is the headquarters for the business entity, and at least 50% of its employees spend their working hours at Athens-Clarke County. That defines an Athens-Clarke County-based business. So it's very clear what it is. We know who it is. If there are others, they can raise their hands. And so that's what we're proposing to you today, is that amendment to this, to our rates that makes an exception for an Athens-Clarke County-based business to be able to deposit septage in our water treatment plants, our sewage treatment plants at the J-boom rate.
Any other discussion? Okay, consent? Yes.
I'm happy to put it on consent. I think it's a good solution. I just have one very minor, picky type question. So on this last number 3, such place of operations is the headquarters of the business entity and at least 50% of its employees spend their working hours within ACC. Is it up, well, first of all, is that all of their working hours?
Yes.
Okay, and then I'm presuming it would be up to the hauler to certify that that was the case.
That's about the only way we can do it, yeah. The other part's easy to certify.
Okay.
You had, Ms. Link wanted to say something about
Yeah,
this.
I have no problem putting this on consent. I just want to take the opportunity to bring up the issue that we do have with overflowing and failing septic tanks in the county, and the fact that we don't have any kind of ordinance that mandates that they get pumped regularly. And this is starting to be a problem in some of our older suburban neighborhoods, particularly where a lot of homes have gone towards rental property, and the owners are not keeping up pumping those tanks. This came up at the health department meeting a couple months ago, and I think there's going to be a recommendation coming forward from the health department soon. It is a real public health issue.
Ms. Ron?
Yeah, I wanted to add too with the, I couldn't hear if Commissioner Neesmith covered this part about the committee's report. It's also, as of this date and time, that business owner with the septage. So it's a finite number.
January 1st, 2018.
Yeah. So it's a existing group versus
A new one.
a new group.
Correct.
For that.
Great. Any further? Yes, sir.
Well, just to add that I agree with Commissioner Link. I mean, I would like to see something about requiring septic tanks be pumped periodically, because I do think this is a public health issue, and I think some are in pretty poor condition. The other thing, and I know our staff do this, but just since we have a public forum here, Bully Pit, just to remind people, don't put quote-unquote disposable wipes down the toilet, because they're not disposable, and they do create a lot of blockages in our sewer system.
And they fill your septic tank.
And they
too.
fill the septic tank, and they create a lot of sewage overflow. I mean, when we get the reports on the septic overflow, very frequently the cause is rags, quote-unquote, and quote-unquote flushable wipes, which really are not flushable. So just
Any further
be
discussion?
careful what you're flushing down the toilet.
Any further discussion on septic?
No, I'm done on septic.
I thought we pretty much talked that one to death earlier. Okay. Item number 15 is the transit advertising policy regulations. And I'm trying to remember which committee that went to. Andy, you want to discuss it for us?
So, yes, this is about making it easier for advertising on our transit system. The committee, Government Operations Committee, took a look at this. Transit Director McDuffie had some suggestions, which we all thought were good suggestions of how to increase the revenue from advertising on the buses, and that will help with our finances for our transit system. There were also some cleaning up of the legal language with regards to some suggestions coming from the attorney's office. And so I think this is will enhance our transit system, and if nobody has any objections, I'd like to put it on consent.
Mr. Neesmith?
Commissioner Harrod, I'd be interested in knowing if you guys discussed our new buses and whether or not it was appropriate to put advertising on those.
I don't recall whether we discussed them specifically or not.
Because as I recall, that was one of the reasons we wanted to look at the policy, was to consider prohibiting advertising on those buses.
If that was the reason for it being assigned to the Government Operations Committee, I don't believe that was communicated to me.
I'm a bad communicator because that's what I thought I was asking y'all to do. But it was obvious from the report that the committee felt like it was a valuable thing to do. One of the things, I didn't know whether the dollars we collect on it were really worth cluttering up the look of those beautiful new buses. And I didn't see any dollars mentioned in the report as to what kind of income we get from it. It'd be nice to have that before we vote, I think. Yeah. Yes, ma'am.
I'm on that committee, and when he presented everything and put it on the table, one of the first things I looked at was a picture of a snake. So immediately I said, I will go along with voting on this, but I will not agree with the snake to go on it. So he agreed that he would not
So
do
y'all
that.
prohibited snakes.
But I think he did wind up giving it to your son. Was it your son that was there that got a picture of the snake? Somebody's son was there, and he gave them the picture of the
I
snake.
think it was an ad for, it was Justin
It was Justin, that's right.
Justin is a great fan of snakes.
I should have saved one in my garage for you.
It was an ad for a zoo somewhere. I can't remember where the zoo was now, but.
Yeah. Okay, Ms. Link.
Yeah, that was a bus wrap where it looked like the bus was wrapped in a snake. It was really cool. It briefly came up, and once we saw the advertising revenues, and the necessity, the need for those revenues in our transit system, there's no question we need to advertise on the bus. It's standard practice. And we have pre-existing ad contracts, apparently. It would make it extremely difficult to all of a sudden cancel those ad contracts and say we want shiny, clean buses. And I personally like the look of the ads on the bus. I feel like those big white buses are kind of sterile. And I think that, and it also gives local businesses an affordable opportunity for advertising. There's fewer and fewer opportunities to advertise with print media going away and very few television opportunities. So advertising on the bus, I feel like is a great opportunity for local businesses.
And I did notice that y'all prohibited advertising in our bus stops, shelters. And I think we need to have some place that we're not inundated with advertising. You can set someplace and quietly think without having ads hitting you in the face.
In the spirit of Commissioner Harrod's bully pulpit, you bring up advertising. I sent pictures today of the advertising that we're doing for the Athens West Fest on June the 2nd, beginning at 10 o'clock at the Georgia Square Mall, where we bought advertising space on the electronic digital billboards in Oconee County. Very, very inexpensive.
No Clarke County tax money went into that.
No, ma'am, not a
Okay.
penny. Not a bit. The good merchants on Atlanta Highway paid for that.
I know.
So June the 2nd is when that is, and you can see the ads in Oconee County.
And I would urge everybody on June 2nd to go out there and enjoy it.
Thank you, ma'am.
The next item on our agenda, are y'all happy with that? That did go on consent, okay? Oconee, right,
There's a question about the income,
Oh, okay.
and we can follow up with more specific information, but I think our existing contract provides roughly $60,000, may at best $75,000 worth of income. My understanding is with these changes to the advertising policy, we should be able to at least double that amount, potentially even have more we can have more, but at least double it. But we can provide more information.
I'd like to request that we keep this off consent so that we can share this information.
Okay, good. And one observation I'll make, for whatever it's worth, that I've noticed that with advertising on our buses, the new buses, that there's nothing on the back of the bus that indicates it's an Athens-Clarke County bus.
I noticed that.
If you're behind it, you see the advertising, but you don't see anything that tells you it's an Athens-Clarke County bus. So have it on the side, but not the backs of the bus. Okay, we will move on to item number 16, which is the Oconee Rivers Greenway Network Connection East Campus Connector Construction Contract Award. Anybody want to talk about that, or y'all want to put it on consent?
We'll talk about it and then put it on consent.
Okay.
How about that?
Okay.
Let me make sure I'm talking about the right thing here. Isn't
And I
this,
don't mislead you.
this is in my district. This is the bridge, right? The long-awaited connection.
$1 million bridge.
The details are in there. But anyway, so this is going to give us a bridge over the river so that the latest new section of the Greenway will be connecting to the University of Georgia. And there's a dead-end sidewalk at this connection over at the Performance Arts Center behind the Lamar Dodd School of Art in East Campus. So that's going to be a major connectivity to the growing Greenway. And speaking of growing, there's also a UGA parking lot that's growing as we speak over there by our Water Reclamation Center, which is going to, this bridge is going to assist people who park there that maybe don't do transit into campus or whatever campus they're going to. They would be able to ride to
That's
their.
a parking. Well, not
Park and ride for the
park and ride
University of Georgia. Mhm.
A parking lot ride on bicycles.
Yes,
And- and
exactly.
and transit. And
The
transit as well.
multimodal.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah. And
Ms.
so,
Lynn?
and I hope that we can put this on consent.
Yeah, Ms. Link.
So I just want to point out that part of this money is from a grant, correct? Transportation Enhancement Grant that was originally awarded to UGA and they transferred to us. So there is a little bit of UGA skin in the game through a federal grant that they applied for.
Wasn't that about 400,000 or something?
Yeah, 400,000 of a $3 million project.
Anybody else? Ms.
Yeah,
Smith?
just to point out what Commissioner Wright said, this bridge actually goes not only across the river, it goes across the entire floodplain. And that's one of the reasons it's so long. It's too bad we don't have renderings of the bridge here.
We should.
Do we?
Hold on, wait for it.
I don't see a rendering of the bridge. It's really going to be quite beautiful.
We've got the route, but I
We
haven't
got
seen
the
a
route, but
rendering.
we don't have a rendering.
Oh, right. The routing is here, and it does show the trail way to
It's
get
going to be
it
a
to where-
strikingly beautiful bridge.
But that would, the East Campus connector, the main visual that shows the river and the existing trail is on 133 of our 235-page packet.
I guess after we see the design, which is what this is going to pay for, we'll get to see the
Yeah.
design.
Okay, Ms. Bratton, I go on consent.
If I could add to, the contractor that's, we're recommending to get the contract is the same contractor that just built the newest portion of the Greenway, so you've seen their work.
And that's very nice. Yeah.
And I will add, if you guys had seen in our latest Georgia Engineering magazine, they got an award, an engineering award for those bridges that they already did.
Firefly.
The Firefly.
Firefly Bridge.
Yeah, it's hard to separate all that.
Oh, yeah.
So, but is that the same contractor or not?
No,
The
that's-
bridge, that's separate?
That was
Different.
a different contractor.
Okay, so
But the
this will
one
match
that we
the
just
Greenway.
cut the ribbon on.
Gotcha. So it'll match those, thank you.
Okay. Okay, number 17 is our lease agreement with the Junior League of Athens for Taylor-Grady House. And I will let y'all know there'll be a minor change to the contract that was sent out for our next meeting, and it relates to having animals in the house, and we're eliminating that possibility for the future, so.
Not an animal house anymore.
It's not an animal, it's not going to be an animal house. Consent, anybody have a problem?
Yeah.
Consent.
Yes, sir.
I don't necessarily have a problem with it, but wasn't the addition of allowing animals requested specifically because of the housekeeper, though, if I remember correctly?
Because of the house.
Wasn't there something about a housekeeper or something?
They have resident managers that live there that have had 2 dogs for the whole 9 years they've been there. And it's just now come to our attention. The president of the Junior League told me that they prefer not to do that in the future, so we're grandfathering those particular animals. But any damage to the property that's caused, the Junior League's going to take care of fixing it. So, and in the future, that if this resident manager leaves, or the 2 dogs they have either die or are disposed of in any way, or moved someplace else, they cannot bring any other animals there. And that's what the change is in the lease.
Okay, maybe I misunderstood it then. I thought that they were asking for the same lease, except that animals would now be allowed, and you're telling me that that's not the case?
That was the original request.
And so now that's not what they're
And
requesting?
that, well, I had a problem with it, and and so did our Mayor Pro Tem when we saw it on the agenda. And we discussed it with the Junior League, and they actually don't want it in the future. They were just trying to protect the situation that was there right now. And we're grandfathering that in and taking care of it. So, consent, everybody?
Yes.
Okay. Number 18 is the Athens Creative Development Campus, and this is the abandonment of the public right-of-way of Strong Street between College Avenue and Jackson, and a public hearing is tentatively scheduled for June 5th. So this is a part of that process, and it can't go on consent, so any discussion? Okay. Item number 19 is West Hancock Neighborhood Public Engagement Process, and that relates to the hiring of a consultant. We allocated in the budget last year $25,000 to follow up with the West Hancock study, and that's what this item is. And anybody want to discuss that, Ms. Link?
Yeah, I just want to kind of reiterate the process or lack thereof that's brought us here. A year ago, when it became clear that there were several properties in danger of demolition in this neighborhood that is on the National Register of Historic Places, and a neighborhood that has a lot of very significant history to the Athens African American community, we initiated this demolition moratorium. And there were a small number, maybe even just one or two residents who lived outside of that immediate Reese Street neighborhood, more down in the Hancock area, and actually a resident who didn't even live within the moratorium area, who insisted that they didn't want the government to be involved in coming up with recommendations for the neighborhood, that they could lead a neighborhood process to come forward with some recommendations. By fall, it was pretty clear that that wasn't happening. They were provided with contact information for folks in the Reese Street corridor who were directly impacted by possible development changes. And that outreach had not been made. Commissioner Gertz and I met with the College of Environmental Design folks, asking them to come up with a proposal to do a study. There's a little bit of back and forth, and come January, they rescinded that study. The reasons why are still kind of unclear, but they said they would no longer be available to do that study. There was a little bit of scramble to figure out what the next step would be. And, we recognized that the real issues in the neighborhood were being faced by that Reese Street corridor. That was a unique neighborhood in and of itself, and it was particularly vulnerable because the properties are adjacent to commercial general properties. This whole entire neighborhood is zoned multifamily. It was rezoned to multifamily 20 years ago, basically targeting it for student housing. We've already seen, about 10 years ago, we saw several houses further down on Hancock be bulldozed for a fraternity house. So now we're at a point where this moratorium is about to run out. And there is no process. There is no means of determining what can be done to protect this neighborhood. There's not a whole lot of interest in historic designation. It is a working class neighborhood, and there are financial burdens that come along with historic, official local designation. We really need an outside, unbiased consultant to come in and do a study of the entire neighborhood, to speak with the residents, to look at our zoning codes, maybe to come up with some design guidelines, maybe, who knows? We don't know what the end result is, but the fact of the matter is this neighborhood faces imminent threats. We have an extremely historic property that already the demolition, the 90-day demolition hold has already expired. So, when this demolition moratorium expires tomorrow, the bulldozers can roll right in. So this is this would be the last chance to save this neighborhood. We can go ahead and make the commitment to hiring this consultant, and we can maybe stop this cycle of destruction. The African American community in Athens has seen their neighborhoods bulldozed over and over and over again to make way for high-rise dormitories and fraternity houses, apartment buildings. We can stop that. We can begin to make amends for that trend. So I'm asking that we go ahead and commit to hiring this consultant, and in this special session to follow, that we commit to extending this demolition moratorium for 8 months to allow time to find that consultant, do the proper outreach, develop some new recommendations, and really reach out to this community and show the rest of Athens and show our African-American community that we care about their history and we care about their neighborhoods and that they deserve to be preserved. This neighborhood has been underserved and overlooked for generations, and it's time that we make up for that and we preserve it and we take those extra steps.
Anyone else wish to speak to this item? Okay.
Mayor,
Yes,
I
sir.
just want to say I'm grateful for the consultant approach. I think fresh eyes are always helpful. I do also want to make note of some other planned activities and forthcoming activities in the neighborhood that are significant when it comes to quality of life. And in conversation with members of the neighborhood on Reese Street and West Hancock, quality of life is just the resounding theme. And I think you heard it at the podium, the prospect of just having a comfortable neighborhood, a place that you enjoy living. And so $4 million has been committed through TSPLOST to the neighborhood for mobility purposes, safe passage, like we talked about with some of the pedestrian activities just a couple of items ago, is one of those things that makes you feel comfortable in your neighborhood. And so I think that will have a significant effect. One of the items countywide on the planning department's short-term work plan is looking at those issues of adjacency between residential and commercial development. And so that will have an impact here and, of course, resound beyond that. And obviously, having been on the campaign trail, I have not heard from a current sitting elected official or a prospective elected official who does not like the idea of a tax circuit breaker that would allow seniors who are of limited means to stay in their homes. So I think as a package, there are some very strong prospects. And I think there may be some additional things that a consultant is able to suss out that are unique to this area too. But I want to make it clear that while there's always work to be done, the sky's not falling.
Thank you. Anyone else? And I would like to say something very quickly, and that's as far as the neighborhood being neglected and senior citizens. Probably about 15 years ago, I brought forward a proposal when I was tax commissioner for a freeze on property assessments for senior citizens, and the school board embraced it immediately. The mayor and commission never voted on it. And I brought it forward the first year I was mayor, and it did not go forward. I think that it would have helped some of these older residents that we're concerned about now had we done that. But I'd also like to say that in the 26 years that I was tax commissioner, we never sold an owner-occupied home in Clarke County. And that is totally unique to the whole state of Georgia and probably the United States. But the reason was that we had a commitment to working with our citizens and set up a process to allow people to pay incremental payments on their taxes to catch the taxes up. And because of that, the county and the school board never lost a dime. The monies, including penalties and interest, were there for the government to use, and people were allowed the dignity to stay in their homes. And I expect that some of the people in this corridor probably benefited by that process. And so, you know, I tend to disagree that this neighborhood and any neighborhood in Clarke County has been totally neglected for the older and the minority people. And so I just wanted to get that out there because it's sort of ancient history, but it's history that's relevant right now. Mr. Gertz.
And just to make clear, that the two successor tax commissioners have taken the same approach.
Yes, they're continuing the program. And incidentally, they're also collecting 99% of the taxes in Clarke County. And I think that's unique in the state too, because counties will tell you they collect 100%, but many of them, in fact, most of them, now sell the bi-phase to private companies to collect, and they don't have the welfare of the citizens at heart as do their elected officials. So I'm very proud of what Athens-Clarke County does. Anyone else? Yes, ma'am.
I just want to point out that, regardless of whether or not someone can afford to stay in their home and age in their home, when your neighborhood is changing and when it has been targeted for student housing and you're surrounded by rowdy college students, transient students who are in and out, you no longer feel safe. You no longer feel welcome in your own neighborhood. Parking's an issue. We're seeing these issues in this neighborhood. We've seen, and historic preservation isn't even the answer to these problems. We put a historic district down on East Hancock in the Pope Street area, and it's now completely all student housing, and there are very few original residents left there. It's not really a pleasant place to live for them, for the most part. I mean, you drive through there on a Saturday afternoon, and there's a keg party in every front yard. There's cars lining both sides of the roads. Rowdy students walking up and down the sidewalks late at night, and red Solo cups scattered everywhere. It doesn't matter whether or not you can afford to stay in your home if the neighborhood around you changes so much that it's no longer comfortable or you don't feel welcome in your own neighborhood. So this is a zoning issue. It's not just a matter of economics, and it's not just a matter of preservation of homes. It's a zoning issue.
Anyone else wish to speak before we move on? Okay. And that one is title only, so maybe we better leave it on the discussion agenda. And item number 20 is the adoption of the 19 operating capital budgets and establishing the property tax rates and for other purposes. And right now it's title only, but is there any discussion that anyone wants to have on this?
Well, since we've been discussing this, seems like all week, and I'm glad that we wrapped up our part last night. I was wondering if the manager could let us know, or so we could share at this time. Do we have a time when the budget packet this is ready to put on the web so that people could start looking at the details as of last night?
Yeah.
Will that be before, what date would that be so that people can look for it?
I'd have to let you know.
Okay.
I believe we'll need to adopt it in June.
Oh, yes, no, we will.
Yes.
I'm hoping by the end of the week.
Okay.
We'll have something to share.
Sooner than the agenda packet, I would imagine. Is that accurate? Sooner than the agenda packet for the voting meeting?
The agenda packet's already out.
I mean, sooner than the Friday, sorry.
Friday before.
How soon, yeah, the Friday before, sorry.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, we should have details prior to that agenda going.
So it can be on the front of the website as far as people looking for it? Could there be something that could lead people to know?
Sure, we can work on that.
If that would be something.
Okay, item number 21, which is the last on our old and new business, and that's the creation of a full-time Victims Against Violence Against Women's grant investigator for the district attorney's office. And he told me this afternoon that he did get the grant, but because we did not advertise acting on this tonight, I told him it would be June 1st when we would act on it. So he'll be ready to hire somebody on June 1st, hopefully.
Consent agenda?
Consent, okay. Okay, and before we bring Brad up here, I've got, I want to give Jean, for the record, some names for our corridor study committees. We've engaged a consultant to work with us on the Lexington Road and the Atlanta Highway corridors, and we have subcommittees that are going to be working with them. And the one for the Lexington Road Committee is going to be chaired by Commissioner Andy Herod, and the members are Sharon Dickerson, and we don't have a replacement for Harry Sim yet, but we're going to wait until after the election to make that decision. Carl Nichols, David Spooner, Maxine Easom, Hank Joyner, Diane Napier, Michael Myers, Christine Thornton, Mike Tuggle, Ryan Worsley, is that the right pronunciation? And Robert Miles. And on the Lexington Road, it will be, Atlanta Highway, Leslie Lawson, Carla Braswell, Una Benson, Marissa Chastain, Dusty Ginn, Pam Spar, S-P-H-A-R, Margaret Lightfoot, John Atkins, and Jim Scanlon, and that will be chaired by Commissioner Jerry Neesmith. And Jean, I'm going to give these to you. So I wanted to go ahead and get them in the record so that if they need to hold a meetings to work with the consultants there, they can go ahead and do that.
Can I, are those representatives from specific districts that
No.
are on there?
No, they were recommended by the chairs on of each one of them, Commissioner Neesmith and Commissioner Harrod.
So this is the
So
Atlanta
it's-
Highway and Lexington Highway?
Yes,
Okay.
right, yeah. Okay, okay, we'll ask Brad to come forward and walk us through what we're doing with planning. Ready when you are, Brad.
Okay. Okay, I think we have 5 or 6 for you this evening. First 4 are very similar in their nature. First item is a special use request in an RS-15 zoning district at 140 Winchester Way. These first 4 that you see are a product of a request you made to staff several months ago with regard to what Hope Haven currently was operating under the state license as community living arrangements, but were not permitted under local ordinance as special use permits. And so those 4 have been submitted and are being presented to you this evening. First one, special use in RS-15. With all of these, the house or the home would remain as it is. No requested variances on this one. No change required to our future development designation. And as with all special uses, if approved, as long as the special use remains in place on the property, the plan and report as approved become binding. You see the location here on Winchester Way off Pointers Ridge. An aerial of the property. This is the existing condition of the property as seen from the street. No changes proposed. Site plan. If you read through the reports, there was some information presented to the Planning Commission through really kind of a misunderstanding of the applicant. They thought that they would be required to impose buffers and fences around these uses as part of the special use permit, so they were indicated on the plan, where in fact they're not required under the zoning, and it really, from a staff standpoint, the real purpose of the special use, especially with this type of an individual personal care home, is try to maintain the property as much in keeping with the neighborhood as possible. They're not required to meet any commercial standards. It should act and function just like any other house in the neighborhood. And so the Planning Commission actually had a discussion with the applicant. It's the same on 3 of these that they thought they were required under. And they have been given the option to put up a fence at some point down the road if they wish to, but it's not their intention to do it on any of them at this point. So with that, for this first item, the recommendation from the Planning Commission is to approve the special use request for an individual personal care home with the condition that I just described, and it was a unanimous vote.
Any discussion or questions? Okay, Brad, we move on to, Mr.
Yeah, I
Smith.
just wondered, Hope Haven's bringing us 4 special use permits for care homes they already had. How did they get a permit from the state without meeting our regulations? Do you have any idea? I don't expect you to have.
I think, well, and part of this would be speculation, but I think part of the confusion was the state permits these under a different name. I mean, these are permitted at the state level as CLAs instead of personal care, and it really gets down to the mechanism for funding. So
the state knows that they don't they say that they don't issue these permits unless they have the appropriate permits within the local government?
I think we have seen some change in that recently at the state level, but, and I certainly can't speak for them.
No, I know.
No.
Does Hope Haven know they were supposed to get a special use permit?
I think the discussions that we had early on with Hope Haven, with their representatives, were they thought they were CLAs and not personal care, because that's what their license said.
Thank you.
Next item, very similar. This is property on Pine Valley Drive. Again, special use in the RS-25 zoning district. No variances, no change to future development designation, and again, no proposed changes to the property. Here you see the property located on Pine Valley, just a block off of Westlake and just south of the Beechwood Shopping Center. Aerial. And then just a couple of pictures, existing condition of the house. Site plan, no proposed changes. And again, the recommendation from Planning Commission was unanimously to approve with the same condition as the previous item.
Questions? Yes, sir.
Thanks. I think this is in Commissioner Hamby's district, but
Yes, it is.
he's sick this evening. So I spoke with him earlier today, and he wanted me to communicate that he's been working with the attorney's office on a couple of issues. I think he's generally sympathetic to this, but I think he wants some protections for the neighborhood. And so a couple of assurances that he wants to have added that will give some assurances to the residents living in the homes and in the neighborhood. One is to make sure that there's a yearly state inspection report filed with the planning department. And the second is to make sure that the special use permit is contingent upon a professional organization maintaining management of the housing and providing needed assistance to the residents. So he wanted me to communicate that deal.
The next one.
Okay. Next item is, this one's a little different based on the underlying zoning, but this is 169 Oak Bluff, a special use in a commercial rural zone. And this one is actually one half of a duplex instead of a single-family structure. Again, special use permit, no proposed improvements or variances, and binding plan and report. This is up off Commerce Road. And you see the duplex property, and then the front of it, and no proposed changes.
Questions? Yes, sir.
I think this is the first time I've seen such a proposal for a duplex. We permit that, huh?
We've had a couple. You reviewed one a few years ago out off Beaver Dam Road in one of those neighborhoods out towards the end of Beaver Dam towards Robert Harden.
Yeah, I remember that now.
We don't see them a lot, but they are permitted.
Have we heard from the other tenant?
Again, it was a unanimous approval. And then the last one is 250 Huntington Road.
Brad, can we back up just 1 second? These properties are posted, that they're going to be looked at tonight, aren't they?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah. So if the other tenant had a problem, they could have come forward.
There were people at the Planning Commission meetings. There were, on this one, there may have been somebody, the previous one that represented one of the occupants of the unit, a family member perhaps that came and spoke, but.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay, again, special use, RS-25, no variances. This is right across from the mall. You see here the location, the house, and site plan, no proposed changes here, and unanimous recommendation for approval by the Planning Commission.
Questions, concerns? Yes, sir.
Yeah, I've had some neighbors express some apprehension about this. There have been some issues there in the past. I think I'd like to ask for the same kinds of conditions that Mr. Hamby has conveyed through Commissioner Harrod. Still don't know if I'm going to support it or not, though.
Anybody else? Okay.
Oops. Okay. Next Next item is a special use for a religious institution, a special use in an RS8 zoning district for a religious center at 445 Tallassee Road. It is compatible with existing traditional neighborhood future development. Property is about 8.5 acres in size. Its purpose is to construct an Islamic center, prayer hall, offices, and meeting rooms. Currently 3 structures on the property, 2 of which to be demolished, the third to remain and be used for the institutional uses. They're still not exactly sure what the use of the, and I'll show you which one that is, but it would be part of the religious center. 6,000 square feet, 42 parking spaces, 125 seats. This one feels bigger when you look at it, but it's probably about the same size as the church that you recently reviewed up on Danielsville Road. I think that was 100 seats instead of 125, but very similar in terms of scale of building, in terms of a footprint at least. There is a variance that is being requested with this, which is to eliminate the required sidewalk construction along the Tallassee Road street frontage. There you see the property, and I can get this to work. This structure remains. These other 3 you see are to be removed. And then a view going out Tallassee Road with the property to your left. And the other direction. And then an overall site plan that proposed for the development of the property. Elevations. These elevations do become binding upon approval if it is approved, as well as the site plan. And then as far as recommendations go from the Planning Commission could not support the variance to eliminate the sidewalk, and as such recommended denial. Now, what typically will happen if we get a denial of a variance as part of a special use, it either leads to a denial of the special use or it leads to the inclusion of a condition to rectify what they were asking for. And in this case, that's what's taking place. There is a condition added that the sidewalk must be installed. And then there was just a few minor issues on their plan. Buffering standards weren't exactly right. Specific information about the use of the house and driveway and stormwater. Those are really conditions just to ensure compliance with underlying ordinance standards. With that, the recommendation from the Planning Commission was unanimous for the special use, but not for the sidewalk variance.
And this is the former Friendship Christian Church, is that correct?
No.
This is not it?
No.
Oh, it looked, what you were describing sounded like a church.
Yeah, it's an Islamic center.
Oh, I know this is an Islamic center, but it sounds like it's the location of the former Friendship Christian Church. That's not it.
Oh, no, it's just down the road, just out a little bit further.
Further out, okay.
Just past, kind of across from where Chad's Walk entrance and subdivision is.
Okay. Mr. Neesmith.
I got a letter from the Greenway Commission about the sidewalk. They too believe that sidewalk must be built, as do I. So if we do pass this, it will be a condition that the sidewalk be built, as far as what I have to say about it. In looking at this property, where it gets really difficult on the sidewalk construction is just within this last few feet down here at a culvert. And we've talked to our engineers in Public Works, and we generally, if we get into that situation and it becomes a very monumental expense for those last few feet, and we're not going any further immediately with it anyway, we will work with them to get them to a point, and then we can pick up the balance at a time that there are modifications to the culvert and crossing to make the rest of it happen. Sounds good.
Any other? Yes, sir.
Yeah, just a little more detail and maybe question about the amenity, and Nat Kuykendall mentions in his letter that this is, of course, part of the alignment for that street-based Greenway connection that ultimately will connect Ben Burton Park with the Tallassee Forest and Bernie Harris Lyons Middle School.
Over the new bridge.
Over the new bridge that we've recently spoken about. So I'm very excited about the entirety of that project. And of course, this will tie in. So I guess I would just, and you don't have to tell me tonight, Brad, but I would just want to make sure that we're preserving sufficient width in the sidewalk alignment so that we have something like a 10-foot width path that's available so that we're not planting trees or putting signage or other things in what'll be that future pathway.
Okay, I'll check on that.
Okay.
Anybody else have anything to say or ask about this? Okay, we'll move on to next one.
Okay.
It's our comprehensive
The
plan.
next item is our comprehensive plan, and for this one, I'm going to ask Gavin Hasmer to come forward. Gavin's been our project manager on this one from the beginning, and so I'm going to let him land this one at the same time. He's taken us all the way through, so he will be bringing you up to speed on our approvals from the state and what our next steps are.
Thank you, and good evening. I believe the last time I presented this item in front of y'all was at your February work session, and it was just before we were to send the draft to the state for their review. So I would like to start out by saying thank you to y'all as stakeholders for your comments and your questions during those work session updates, as well as your participation in some of the community events that I know many of you attended throughout this process. We're approaching 1 year into this process, and if you were to have asked me a year ago, even 6 months ago, if we were going to meet the deadline, I would have been skeptical. But here we are tonight, just on time. And I think that's a testament to not only the community's hard work, but also the steering committee, as well as their eagerness to have this adopted and move forward with implementation of a lot of the measures that are in this document. I also think that sentiment is shared with some of the other communities in the state of Georgia. I had the privilege recently of presenting at the 2018 Georgia Planning Association Conference in spring with Kyle May, the consultant from Envision Athens, and it was based on how Athens-Clarke County took this approach this time around to our comprehensive plan and how we used Envision Athens as a foundation for our comprehensive plan, and that brought a lot of interest from some of the other communities in Georgia. So with that, here tonight, as you'll see up on the screen, the document is in its final draft status. We received approval from the Georgia Department of Community Affairs as well as the Northeast Georgia Regional Commission. There are two versions of the document online. The first is the DCA approved version with the highlights, which indicate the edits that were required by the state, as well as the common content highlighted version that has been up for some time. And that was a direct result of some of the public engagement that we received prior to sending this document to the state. If you will, it highlights some of the important content that community members found important and wanted to see throughout the document without having to search through 500 and some pages. They wanted to be able to easily access that specific topic. So that version has been online for a couple months now as well. There was one required correction from the state out of a 500-page document, and that was we had to change the title of our future development map to the future land use map. And that was it, other than also demonstrating to them how our classifications on our future land use map align with some of the more broad and standard categories that the state is used to seeing, such as residential or commercial or industrial. We get a little more in-depth with our titles and definitions. So other than that, that was the only required edit from the state. It was a unanimous recommendation from the Planning Commission last month. And again, we are in line for the due date, which is July 1st, to maintain qualified local government status. This is just a brief process timeline. This does not highlight everything that was done during this process, but just some of the main important dates. We began on June 1st, 2017 with our first initial public hearing and kickoff. From June 1st really through the end of the year is what we developed in terms of a draft and took in as public input. And during the month of January, we held an open house with public presentations on the draft document. In February, we had our second required public hearing on the draft. And during that meeting, there was a good amount of public input. And based on that meeting, the steering committee decided to table their recommendation for another 12 days to allow for additional time to read the draft, and again, for us to develop that highlighted version to help comb through some of the important topics that were in the document. So after that 12-day waiting period, the steering committee met for a third time on February 19th and recommended unanimously that the mayor go ahead and forward the document to the state for review. That took place in March. We also received the edit for the document and made those edits, had them re-reviewed in April, and again, it was just heard at the Planning Commission on May 3rd. I won't go through all of this, but just some of the public engagement that took place. Again, we based a lot of this off of the efforts of Envision Athens. We wanted to use that and complement that. We sent out our own surveys, conducted our own public input and public outreach, as you'll see towards the bottom. And this included setting up mobile stations, various public presentations, display ads. We were fortunate enough to have 7 different articles between the Banner Herald and the Flagpole that were centered upon the comprehensive plan. So we feel like we did a good job with the public engagement process. The committee, again, we came to you frequently during the work session updates for the past couple months, myself and Brad, and then the 15-member steering committee met at least 9 times for work sessions, and that doesn't include informal attendance or public outreach events. And again, that was a unanimous approval that they sent it forward for review. The future land use map, properly titled now, is a part of this element, but although we did make a couple changes, for the most part, this map has not changed. And what you'll find is in the work program, this is one of the items that the committee felt strongly needed more time in order to properly review this and put the work into it that needs to be done when you're talking about 42,000 parcels of land. It wasn't something they were willing to tackle in a 3-month process. So you'll find that in the community work program that they would like to comprehensively look at this land use map at a point in the very near future. And again, that community work program is a part of this document. Each project is associated with a goal, strategy, policy, need, or opportunity. It's coded as such, and a lot of these projects were taken from your FY18 strategic commitments, directions, and actions, as well as TSPLOST projects. So a lot of those items you'll be very familiar with. And again, this is just the timeline briefly, but if you have any questions, please let me know.
Thank you, Gavin. Any questions for Gavin or Brad? Ms. Link?
I want to thank staff for their attention to some of the citizen concerns in this process. I went to most of the meetings, and kind of late in the game, there was some citizen interest in the comp plan, and particularly in that land use plan. And I just want to point out the topics that staff went through the document and highlighted. These were the topics that folks were interested in knowing how this plan addresses these particular concerns in our community. They were poverty, equity and diversity, employment, youth development, inclusion and gentrification, affordable housing, and communication and engagement. So, I think that forms a pretty good framework to point out the concerns of folks in our community, and as our community develops and as we possibly readdress our zoning and adopt that new future land use plan. And I think these are the kind of concerns we need to hold front and center in many decisions that we make. It was a real interesting meeting when the steering committee address these, and there was some really interesting back and forth. I felt like it was a very productive meeting in which citizens were allowed to have that kind of back and forth exchange with folks on the committee, and I would hope that we can have more of that kind of communication.
Mr. Harrod?
I mean, I agree also. I thought it was a good process. I went to several of the meetings, and I thought there was good engagement with the public, and really the only comment I was going to say is I remember when it used to be called the Future Land Use Map, and then the state made us change the name to Future Development Map.
Yes.
And now it's gone back to the Future Land Use Map, and I have to say I think Future Land Use Map is a much better title. So whoever made that decision at DCA, good.
Good memory. I'm impressed.
I remember it too.
Mr. Neesmith?
Yeah, so, I concur about this process and how difficult it seemed and was, but the fact that you made your deadline is very commendable, especially after all the work that Envision Athens did, and you had to digest that as well.
Yes.
As your steering committee and public input. One little question. As I recall, in the last comprehensive plan, we had a future land use called rural residential.
Yes.
Is that still in there?
Not in this version. I think Brad can probably bring it up, but what the steering committee did for this initial step, again, prior to a comprehensive rework of the entire map, is they felt strongly that on our future development map, the one that's current, we have 14 categories, one of which is the rural residential. And on this map, you'll see we went down from 14 to 9. We consolidated those categories. And Brad can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think the majority of the rural residential ones went to rural. Is that correct?
It did, and rural residential was in there 20 years ago when we were struggling with density and zoning districts, and was there going to be more than one size? But as we evolved, what we ended up with is we had a rural and a rural residential, and when you looked at them together in the compatibility matrix, they were exactly the same thing in terms of what zoning was allowed in them. So we consolidated them, but then there is an action item in the short-term work program to go back and to revisit that agricultural zoning district in terms of trying to consider, 20 years later, is 10 acres still the right size? Is there a need for a second agricultural zone? But that's a work item that is plugged in.
Which the other consideration is that out our way, there's neighborhoods that are all AR.
That's right.
And they're, 1 acre lots or larger. And we certainly don't want to change it to RS 45 or anything like that, but we do need something in between. So, yeah, okay.
Yeah.
And that's a separate work program item from even the future land use comprehensive redo. There's a separate one just for that rural category.
We're pretty excited about the redo of the future land use map. I mean, I think what we're looking at trying to do with this is to take more of a form-based approach to it instead of this traditional, where you may end up with fewer general categories, but then they're lumped into an overlining category that you're urban or you're suburban or you're rural. And depending on which one of those areas you're in, you may be in commercial general zoning, but if you're commercial general in the suburban area, that may bring with it different standards than it does in a very urban area in terms of parking ratios and lot coverages. And once you get out into the rural, maybe it even relaxes it a little more. And
then the residential and current AR, we have flexibilities, but we also lack some protections.
Right. But that is a big work effort that not only involves future development, future land use map, but also you're digging back into the zoning ordinance too. Okay.
Mr. Williams had something he wants to add.
And Brad, I think maybe you could share with us, I know that this was a real innovative way of combining two different processes to leverage maximum citizen input, on a much broader scale than we've ever done before. And this has been noticed by folks around the state, and we are being asked to come and share the story of how we got there. And we had to really work with DCA to let them allow us to have a little extra time to pull this off, but I thought it was very well done.
Yeah.
And want to thank everybody that was affiliated with Envision Athens and all the citizens that participated there, as well as our staff and the Planning Commission on the comp plan side, and the steering committee.
Yes, the state was watching us before this really ever kicked off, and we called DCA when Gavin was the one that kept pushing me, saying we're going to make it. I didn't think we were going to make it, but so I went ahead and called the state to see what kind of opportunities we had to be late, and I mean, they knew about us already. They said, we know exactly what you're doing, we're watching you, and gave us some suggestions, and so, with an approval in June, then what we will do at that point is we package the document and send it back to them one more time that says it's done, it's completed, and we will meet that July 1st timeline. But you will also be getting then at your June, July cycle, a series of text amendments to the zoning ordinance, because there are about at least 30 or 40 locations within our zoning ordinance because of the marriage of the two documents that we specifically reference a future development map instead of a future land use map. We reference the 2008 adopted comprehensive plan, which that has to be changed. And then we will kind of have with the future land use map, there will be a date at which it will go into effect once those ordinance amendments go into effect as well, so we don't have an ordinance that is addressing a map that's no longer valid. Those all come next month.
Ms. Neesmith?
Well, as sort of a compare and contrast, I was very active in the last comprehensive plan, and I remember how painful the end of it was, where the citizens who had given many hours felt like that the government had basically taken their recommendations, changed them, and adopted them without their review, to make a long story short, which caused a great deal of angst and anger among those citizens. It seems that you avoided that this time because the citizen participation was very much different.
It was very different, and then I think the last minute request of the steering committee to us to do the context-based version where it was color-coded, I think that answered a lot of questions, and it started to show people that, if I'm looking for poverty-related issues, I look for this color, and there's a lot of that color in here. I will tell you, just to follow up on Blaine's comment a minute ago, I went to the state conference. I did not participate. I let Gavin and Kyle do that, but there were, you can normally tell at the end of a presentation how many questions do you get as to whether or not you did well or not, and how many people wait around and come up to you when it's done. And they were covered up when it was over. Even the Decatur people were very interested in our process. So I think they've done a good job with it.
Good job.
Okay. That's all we've got. Thank you very much.
Gene, I got to go back up there to lift the screen up, so.
Where am I going?
We have another special meeting that has been called by 5 commissioners, and we have to have a quorum to conduct a meeting. So, Ms. Bradley, would you call the roll for us, please?
Dickerson. Link.
Here.
Wright. Present. Bailey. Neesmith.
Present.
Dale. Here. Harrod.
Present.
Gertz.
Here.
And Hamby. And we do not have a quorum.
I'm sorry, folks, that y'all waited around. I realized this, but there was nothing I could do to control it. Yes, sir.
I've been reading Robert's Rules of Order. And the meeting can be called to order. And then the next step, both under our charter and under Robert's Rules, is there are 4 options that the group has. The first is setting a continued meeting through the motion to fix the time to which to adjourn. The second is ending the meeting through a motion to adjourn. The next is recessing the meeting in efforts to obtain a quorum. And the last is taking measures to obtain a quorum, such as rounding up members or contacting members. So those are the procedural options.
Yes, sir.
Available to you.
Okay. We have not actually, well, did you say we can't call the meeting without the quorum, can we?
Robert's Rules says you can, and the charter says that less than a quorum can adjourn from time to time. So it is possible to call the meeting to order, and then the only thing that would be in order after that is one of those 4 actions that I described.
So we can call a meeting without the quorum.
You call it to order.
Call it to order.
With less than a quorum.
Okay.
And then the body that's here has those 4 options, all of them having to do ultimately with adjourning the meeting.
Okay. Okay. I will call the meeting to order. Is there any motion anybody would like to make of any kind? I'm not sure I understand everything Mr. Berryman said, but hopefully y'all did.
So my understanding is, with the number of us that are here, without going for a roundup for more members, the only point of order that we can have is to adjourn.
Well, you can fix another time for a meeting.
When's our voting meeting?
June 3rd.
I would submit a motion to fix June 3rd as the next date of this session.
I'll second.
Have motion second?
June 5th.
June
sorry.
5th.
June 5th.
Okay.
Oh, thank you.
yeah, there we
Thank
go.
you.
I don't want to come in on Sunday.
June
June
5th.
5th.
I'll accept
Did you
that
say
amendment
fix a
to your
date? Is that
motion.
what this is called? Fix a date?
Fix the date.
Fix the date.
Fix a
Fix the
date.
date.
We're fixing to fix a date.
Okay, June 5th is the date for, is this for?
A vote.
The meeting would
will be-
re-adjourn.
Well,
If it passes, the meeting would re-adjourn on June 5th.
You mean
or reconvene?
Convene.
Reconvene. right.
Reconvene on June 5th. Okay. Now, we have a regularly scheduled meeting. Would that be at the beginning of that meeting, at the end of the meeting, or is there any rationale for how or when?
I think you could call both meetings to order and then just set this latter meeting either first or last. Or you could, the person making the motion could specify that.
Prior to the regularly scheduled voting meeting
At 6 p.m.?
at 6 p.m.
Okay.
I agree with that.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? So we are not adjourning, we are just
We're adjourning, but we
suspending.
fixed it in a meeting time.
Yeah,
Oh, okay.
You're fixed
So-
in your meeting time.
So I'll entertain a motion for adjournment.
So moved. Second.
Any opposed? Okay.
So we fixed the date. Since we
Fixed the
didn't have
date.
quorum.
Right.
We fixed the date
Mhm.
for potential.